So hello, today we are in Breton. I'd like to talk to you about the history of St Mary's Church and the history of the village. So Breton is a village in Essex. It's 1.4 miles from Birch and 7 miles from Colchester. So Breton is surrounded by Essex farmland and the Abberton Reservoir. The elevation is around 52 metres or 170 feet in old money, and today's population is around 285. Now in 1066 we know that Aylmer the Saxon held the manor here, where St Mary's Church stands today. Now Aylmer had 4 smallholders and 1 slave who looked after the cows, pigs and sheep here. Now by 1086 the Normans held this manor, and Turold was the lord and Ranulph Peveril was the tenant-in-chief. Now Ranulph was said to be the illegitimate son of William the Conqueror himself. Now by 1096 Louis Brito the Breton was lord here, and he would give this village its name some 927 years ago. The Breton family were an ancient family and they were forced to flee the Romans in 384 AD, settling in Brittany, France. Now by 1066 Louis Brito would fight alongside William the Conqueror at Hastings, and his reward would be this very manor, Breton's manor. By 1096 Louis had donated lands to the Abbey of St John's in Colchester, and his son Ralph became its first prior. The St Mary the Virgin's Church. We've now moved forward to the year 1325. The Breton family have built a stone church here dedicated to St Mary the Virgin. Now we're just north of the manor house, and just behind us to the south, 100 yards, we have the dugout moat. And here we can see some of the old stones. Moated Breton. Here survives a splendid defensive moat forming an island where once stood a castle or stronghold. Now it may be a little hard to see, but the tree line makes the island, and the moat, we're on a corner of it now. Now moat building peaked around the late 1200s with 6,000 still in existence across England. Now moats were also a sign of wealth and status, and the water here would have been stocked with fish or simply drunk. We've now returned to the site of the old church, built before 1325, for it had a nave and a chancel and a south porch, and on the roof sat a wooden belfry containing 1 bell. The walls were built from mixed rubble and Roman tiles, and the chancel was brick, and here we see some of the original limestone dressings. Now, if we would have walked inside the porch, we would face a 15th century door in oak, and entering the church towards the altar were the remains of an ancient chapel, and to one side a tombstone stood. It was robbed of its brass effigies, but the inscription once read, "Here lieth Alice, formerly wife of Nicholas Breton, who died May 6th, 1392. If we had a look down at our feet, we would see that the floor was laid in brick, and above spans the stone chancel arch, and above that a royal coat of arms. So now I shall read you out some church history. So in 1593 the church wardens were reprimanded for not displaying a Bible and having no parish chest. It's always best to wear trousers. So in 1633 this church had its chest but had no glass in its windows. By 1844 the Reverend Sutton spent much of his own money on renovations here, including a new gallery so the parish children could see over the lofty box pews. Then in 1884 St Mary's received a very bad shaking from a mighty earthquake, and sadly this church would never recover, and by 1902 the congregation had used a barn for services. In 1909 the churchwarden Thomas Simpson painted this lovely church in watercolour, and we'll see that later. Then sadly, just 1 year into World War I, in 1915, it was no more. This church was completely demolished. By 1693, Sir Isaac Rebo, the wealthy cloth merchant of Colchester, was lord here. Now Sir Rebo would represent Colchester's cloth weavers in Parliament. He did much for the poor and requested to be buried without any funeral pomp. By 1789, John and Elizabeth Gripper, both Quakers, held the lordship here. The Gripper family owned 526 acres of farmland across Lower Breton and would build the Quakers' meeting house in 1827. Now, if we could go back to 1827, we would see the Quakers' horses and carriages pulling into Greenfield, where the gate stands to this day. Now the meeting house was built of brick and the interior was fully boarded right up to the ceiling. Now by 1988 the old Quaker congregation had all but gone. The furniture was sold off and the building was pulled down. Now today just a few headstones survive, remembering Edward Gripper and his family. Now we have made our way to the Hound and Hare pub. Which overlooks the village heath where cattle grazed for centuries and fairs were held. In 1897 a large bonfire was lit right here to celebrate Queen Victoria's Jubilee. The building itself dates from the year 1662. In this year Charles II arrives in London by boat and Samuel Pepys watches the first Punch and Judy show. The Hound and Hare would receive its first licence in 1803 when Richard Bundock, the landlord, served ale here. Today in 2024 this pub holds fish and chips Fridays and sports events, and it's a very popular restaurant. Approach Breton from the Blackwater estuary and you will pass over the Abberton Reservoir where we stand now. Essex is one of the driest parts of England, so by 1939 this huge reservoir had been constructed. So this is known as the Causeway, where once 5 cottages stood, but today the Causeway is very popular for bird watchers looking for rare birds. So we have now made our way to Breton's Church of today. Now this church is dedicated to St Mary the Virgin, just like its predecessor 2 miles away. So the Right Honourable James Round intended to build a new church here in Breton, but sadly died beforehand. Now family and friends quickly rallied around and raised £2,000 for its construction. Now Lord Beaumont of this manor donated the land we stand on, and in 1923, almost 100 years to the day, St Mary's Church was built. Now St Mary's Church is built from Essex red brick with limestone dressings. Now if you look on top you'll see a white boarded bell turret. It's very similar to its predecessor. Notice the access door below the tower. Now if we look below we see the west tower. Notice how the stone tracery is based on a 15th century window with Edwardian flair. Above we can see how the architect has incorporated a carved string mould designed to deflect the rain. And today we can see that the scaffolding has gone up because the roof has just leaked. Plus the drains below are blocked. All comes at the same time, doesn't it, in life? Okay, let's go into this lovely old church of Breton. So we'll enter these west doors. So now we've entered this nave, which measures 22 feet by 22 feet, and it was built in 1923. Now I also read that in 1923 Wembley Stadium was first opened and West Ham played Bolton in the FA Cup final. Now if we will start with the memorial behind us as you walk through the west doors. Now this lists all the men of both Layer Breton and Birch that made the ultimate sacrifice during World War I and World War II. And as you can imagine, it must be a shocking amount of men for such a small village. Now stepping back, we have the rectors of Birch. So you can see how the two villages were very closely entwined. And you can also see the diocese crest on the sides. Now, when nearby Birch's Church of St. Peter's was closed, many of the memorials were transferred here, including this list of the rectors. So when I look at churches, I always look for the detail in each of them. And just this notice board, which is fairly modern, just about here, is a fine example of how a memorial has been added to this oak frame. So now we look upon this small and very unusual stone hexagonal font. Its moulded and chamfered bowl changes to a plain order stem and moulded base. Now this old font was in the old rectory garden for 70 years. And I could not say if it come from the original churches of Layer Breton or Birch, but it's 14th or 15th century. Now the 6 sides of this font represent the 6th day of the Holy Week and Good Friday when Christ died. Now if we look upon its top, we see a traced oak font cover which was made by Tony Blythe, a local veterinarian. Now Tony lived with his wife, also a vet, in a tiny cottage on Layer Breton's Heath, just a short walk away from here. Now if you look to the rear, we'll see this beautiful cross window. Now behind the pastoral candle we can see the glass which represents the dove of the Holy Spirit. Now if we step back a little, we can see our first memorial just above the window. Now this beautiful memorial, also from Birch's Church, shows 2 girls overlooking baby Jesus and Mother Mary. Now these girls were the daughters of James Round, Margaret and Lucy. Now James Round lived at nearby Birch Hall, and he was a politician who played first-class cricket. So if we make our way to the corner once again, we can see an original watercolour of Layer Breton's original church. And this was painted by the church warden at the time, Thomas Simpson, in 1909. Now 6 years after this was painted, this church was actually demolished. Now if we look above, we can see a perspective sketch of what Layer Breton's church would look like by the architects Barker and Kirk. It's not too dissimilar to what we have now. Here we have one of my favourite pieces in this church. It shows the Mother, the Virgin Mary with child. I'm not exactly sure how it's constructed, but I think it's like a silk background that's been painted with some embroidery, but it's just lovely, isn't it? I'd just like to show you a solution to moving chairs, which the church warden here has sort of sold, I think, for speed. So if we want to move some chairs, all four are bolted onto a rail. Just simply move the rail along like so. As the French would say, voila. Yeah, it might catch on. It's a good idea, isn't it? So moving towards the sanctuary, we've got another fine memorial. So this is dedicated to Walter de Zoty, the church warden and benefactor of this church, and this rondel was offered by his children in 1934. It's just quality craftsmanship. Look at the carving of this marble. And remember now they use like water jet technology with lasers and all the rest of it. But look at this. This is all done by chisel and the hand. So if we move over to the south wall, I believe this was created by the children of Laird Breton and Birch at the Messy Church. So I think it's made of coloured tissue paper. I've got a memorial here to James Round, Birch Hall, who was responsible for the building of this church. Here we look upon the coat of arms with an interesting history. For first of all, it commemorates George III and his cast in iron from around 1792. Now, originally it hung above the south door of Birch's church, but after George III's claim to France was abandoned, its heraldry was repainted and gilded. So it removes the French fleur-de-lis, I guess, from the centre. Now here we have a very nice copy of the Virgin Mary and Baby Jesus. Would have been from the original by Sandro Botticelli of 1480, and it was simply entitled Madonna of the Book. Now if we look at the detail, Mary's robe is in blue, signifying purity. The cherries in the fruit bowl represent the blood of Christ, plums the tenderness between mother and child, and the figs for the resurrection. If we follow the painting further down, we can see that Christ holds 3 nails and the crucifixion crown, I guess representing that his mother knew that he was destined for the cross, I guess. Now, the Victorians took great interest in Botticelli's work, and around the 1850s they produced many copies such as this. So, okay, now we shall make our way to the sanctuary area itself. If we shall start with this very old chair here. So much is not documented of where this furniture comes from, but it may well be connected to one of the halls or churches themselves. But what does interest me is there is a matching pair opposite. That's a great image right there, isn't it? Now, the church warden did tell me that this magnificent festival frontal was made by we don't know whom or when. It looks like it was made of great quality over possibly years, and it was kept in a drawer and discovered by a church warden of Birch's Church. It's just the finest quality, isn't it? And this background, I believe, is velvet. It's beautiful. Now, if we look at the candle holders either side, they were actually made by Tony Blythe, the veterinarian, who made the font cover. And again, great craftsmanship. The altar rails I have no information on, but I guess they're Georgian. Absolutely beautiful boluses. Again, it's possible they came from one of the previous churches. Now, moving on to the east window, which shows the Virgin Mary and Child Jesus in the central light, and it's dedicated to Mrs. Edith de Zoetti of 1924. Now, small churches like Les Bretons hold, it seems, ancient relics from the past. For if we look either side to St Mary and Christ, we see 2 richly coloured shields. Now, these belong to the first Baron of Howth Castle in Ireland of 1380. Christopher St Lawrence he was called. Now, the original surname of this very ancient family was Tristram, and he commanded an army at Howth and won a great victory on St Lawrence's Day, and the name has been used ever since. Now, the sword from that battle at Howth still hangs in the old castle, 847 years on. Now, what's the connection to this area? Well, the St Lawrence family were active in nearby Colchester. This glass became part of the family inheritance, passed down to the Dezoit family of Breton, and so it was installed here in 1926. Travelling across this wonderful county of Essex and entering these wonderful old churches, from time to time I come across a memorial or a work that's got no description of where it's come from. I've got a feeling this would have come from one of the old families here, and I've got a feeling it's Flemish. It's probably a biblical tale of sorts. There's some sort of beast in a tree, and guy's holding a child's head. I don't know what the significance is, but it looks like his period costumes around 16th century, I'm guessing. And it says beneath, in memory of Mary Eve and Jim Eve as well. Now, like all good churches, we have a trunk or a church chest where once the important documents and valuables would have been kept. Now, I have no record of this, but I believe it's about 16th century due to the hinge design. It's made out of one single board, which, if you feel underneath, is about 1.25 inches thick. If we look on the end, we can see the distinctive dovetail sort of formation. And beneath the food bank box of today, we can see the single lock, and we can see where it's been weathered. Here we have the most plain of all memorials in this wonderful church, but I would say one of the most important. For although faded, it lists 3 brothers who fell in World War I and were the nephews of James Round of Breton. Our first brother was Oriel Round, a lieutenant with the Essex regiment who fought at the Battle of Howth in 1914 on the Western Front. Just listen to this citation. After Lieutenant Round was wounded in the hip at Howth, he saw a wounded sergeant, went courageously after him and carried him about 3/4 of a mile to a place of safety. In doing that, the bullet had entered his hip and had moved down to his knee, where he succumbed after arrival in England. He was aged 22. He never told anything about of his bravery. The sergeant told of it. Now, our second brother was Murray Round, a captain in the Essex regiment. Captain Murray fought in the final days of the Battle of the Somme in France. On the morning of the 13th of November 1916, their objective was to take the German high ground of Le Translay Ridge. The featureless, rain-drenched landscape was drenched or enveloped in thick fog, and it is here that Murray Round would fall. He would receive the Military Cross for gallantry, and like his brother, he was also 22. The youngest brother of this memorial is Harold Round, a captain in the Rifle Brigade. Harold was awarded the Military Cross for exemplary gallantry and the DSO for devotion to duty, and it was written, "When our troops were forced to withdraw, Captain Harold collected a few men and made a strong point within 70 yards of the enemy trench, the position held for 2 days without any supplies. Captain Harold Round was killed on the Guervelt Plateau in the Battle of Passchendaele, Belgium. In 1917, he was aged just 21. Now we should look at something a little bit more modern. This interesting organ. It's got a great history to it. And on a plaque on the wall it says, "Our organ's claim to fame is that 2/3 of it, certainly the internal mechanism and some of its 168 pipes, come from an organ built in 1890 by the famous Father Willis." It goes on to say that the parochial council of the time could not afford a new organ, so it was suggested that they could build one from many parts. And it was actually built under the supervision of students at Merton Technical College in Morden. And it's in memory of Mrs. Vera Rainey of 1986, and it looks like she made it possible by donating the money for it. Now if we make our way outside, and I hope you've enjoyed this video I put together for this lovely old church. Now, although the church is not open every day, if you want to have a visit, have a cup of coffee every first Wednesday of the month. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much. So the folk here meet once a month on a Wednesday, and any money raised from these events they give to a charity which they choose. So this one today, I've been told, is the lifeboats.